My name's Al Bickham. I'm Development Communications Manager for the Total War series.
So what has it been like creatively stepping into 30 years of lore with this Warhammer franchise?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. This is our first time tackling fantasy in the Total War sphere, but it's just enabled us to throw off the shackles somewhat and play with a whole new feature set that we just couldn't do before. We started that with the original Warhammer with things like spellcasting and magic users and flying creatures on the battlefield, and we're just kind of doubling down on that for Warhammer 2. We've just got so much more of that kind of rich 30-year history of Warhammer that we're ploughing into the game in new ways.
So let's talk about some of those new ways with Warhammer 2.
So for starters, the main campaign is set like its way to the west of the old world. In fact, it's the new world. It's the Americas, if you like, of the Warhammer sort of entire world map. Well, we've got 4 new playable races, each of which is going to be like quite remarkably different. You know, one of the big sort of things that made the first game, well, Total War Warhammer 1 successful, was the way we differentiated the races through their sort of suite of campaign mechanics, through their the way their armies are completely different. I mean, these completely different races with different units and different warrior types, and we're just doing that more and more with Warhammer 2, especially when it comes to the kind of campaign feature set. They're going to feel very, very different and asymmetrical to play.
You give us a breakdown of the 4 new races?
Yep, I can give you 3. We've got one unannounced one at the moment. We've got the Lizardmen, which is what we're really talking about today in quite a lot of detail. We've got the High Elves and their mortal enemies, the Dark Elves. They split, in eons past, and are now, at each other's throats essentially. And then we've got a 4th as yet unannounced race.
Since you guys are focusing on that first one, talk a little about in detail those guys.
So the Lizardmen they're actually the oldest race in the Warhammer world, and they were created by the old ones, who were these kind of omnipotent, godlike beings who zipped around the universe via these kind of Stargate-style kind of transportation systems, and they came to the Warhammer world and essentially started terraforming it and doing, moving the tectonic plates and creating a sort of world that was ripe for all sorts of varieties of forms of life. So they created the Lizardmen initially, and then eventually they created the other races as well. But the Lizardmen are the starting point for the Warhammer world essentially as the oldest race, and they follow this thing called the Great Plan, which is the sort of dictate of the old ones, and it's all about equilibrium in the world and keeping the world in balance. But the old ones are gone now. There's a massive chaos invasion. It nearly destroyed the world. The Lizardmen held it right back, and then their civilization essentially fell into ruin through that chaos invasion. It's called the Great Cataclysm. And it was actually the High Elves that eventually ousted chaos and blasted them back to the realm of chaos by creating this sort of giant vortex, which is right above the High Elf homeland now, and it sort of preserves magical equilibrium in the world and keeps the world safe from chaos invasion. But something has happened recently. In the night skies, there's been a disturbance which has essentially caused the Great Vortex to become destabilised. And this is really the narrative thrust of Warhammer 2. Like, all the races want to exploit that. So a couple of the races have very nefarious purposes and want to destabilise the vortex further and exploit the kind of pent-up energy in it. Whereas 2 of the other races want to preserve order. They want to heal the Great Vortex and keep it stable. So those 2 races being the High Elves and the Lizardmen.
Can you talk a little about the unit types for the Lizardmen in the battles that people are playing here?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually on the battle we've got here today, and will be playable at E3 as well. It's a very full roster. It's most of what you can see in the Lizardman army in the final game. And it's a whole range of stuff, but essentially it's scaly lizard-like, as the name suggests, Lizardmen. Scaly different kind of creature types, right from the smallest ones, who are the skinks, who are these kind of super nimble, very small, lizardy, the kind of geckos of the army, really. So they make great skirmishers, and they've got like poison blow darts and all sorts of stuff. Very manoeuvrable. And then you get the Saurus, which are the kind of heavy-hitting backbone of the Lizardman army. And the Temple Guard, who are sort of super tough, they're revered in Lizardman culture. They're ultimately the ultimate protectors of the Slan, who are the highest tier, the highest kind of caste of the Lizardman society. And the Slan mage priests are super powerful magicians that float around on these thrones. They're like giant magic toads that float around on thrones, essentially. But you've got all sorts of other lords and hero types as well. And of course, the Lizardmen, the jungles of Lustria, from where they come, are deadly, and they are full of massive dinosaur-like creatures, basically. So there's a whole range of those that you can recruit into your army as well. And we've got one in particular today. We've got as a mount for Krokgar, who's one of the legendary lords of the Lizardmen. He's a Saurus Old Blood, like the greatest tactical general in the Lizardmen ever spawned, sort of thing. So he's riding around on Krokgar, who's his legendary mount, and that's a Carnosaur, which is essentially a sort of Tyrannosaurus Rex-style creature, absolutely deadly. Can go toe-to-toe with a dragon. It's super tough. So essentially, Lizardmen are sort of dinosaurs, and sometimes riding dinosaurs, and sometimes those dinosaurs riding dinosaurs fire crazy Aztec lasers. So, they're just a magical mix of this kind of Aztec styling and lizards and dinosaurs and teeth and scales. They're just really good fun. Yeah.
And when it comes to the actual gameplay, talk about the new army feature that opens up and ties into the lore.
Yeah, so we've got, this is one of the new features of battle called army abilities. So the Lizardmen have one in particular which enables them to spawn units of cold ones, which are sort of small, these are feral cold ones. They're normally used as mounts by various units, and actually the Dark Elves use them as well as a cavalry mount, effectively. But you can spawn units of these anywhere on the battlefield, and they're really handy for, you engage a unit in the front, you spawn a unit of these guys in the back, and hit the enemy in the rear while you've engaged them. And you can just create these little hammer and anvil smashes with it. But these, all the different races have their own sets of army abilities that they can get, and these are sort of achieved through certain tasks that you do in the campaign game. And the campaign game is, I think, going to be particularly interesting for previous Warhammer 1 players, because there's a whole ton of new features in there that some of them based in the landscape, some of them unique to the races themselves, but they just add lots of colour and flavour to the map.
And you guys also now have dragons breathing fire?
Yep, so that's one of the new, all dragons now have a fire breath ability, so before they enter melee they'll sort of charge up and fire a big huge blast of area effect fire. And then, if you're on control of a dragon, you might just want to circle him and do loads of range damage before you send them in to get stuck in melee. Yeah.
You talk also about the new map that will connect the two games.
Yep. So shortly after launch, we'll be releasing a free update, which essentially combines the old world and the new world. There'll be some slight, so it can all fit. There'll be some slight loss of regions in the far west, but apart from that, it's this vast map which combines, the playable area from Warhammer 1 with the playable area from Warhammer 2. And if you own and you need to own both games, obviously, to be able to access it. But it means you can play as any race that you own over that vast series of continents, right over from the new world from Warhammer 2 and the old world from Warhammer 1. But also included in that are all the new campaign features that we've got, especially those sort of ones that are based in the landscape. There's lots of new sort of exploration areas and rogue armies that are kind of walking around the landscape, and there's all sorts of stuff. But all that's being ploughed into the combined campaign too. So, for example, if you were to play as Empire or one of the other races from the old world, you'd still have all these new features to play with. So it's going to feel very fresh, even for Warhammer 1 players, going back to an old race that they used to play in the old world. Playing that in the combined campaign is going to feel very fresh and new.
And will that expand over when 3 comes out?
Yep, that's the idea. Yep, we just expand it once again to include whatever new landmass that might be. And then by the end of it, we're going to have this absolutely colossal campaign map with all the playable races from the Warhammer lore all represented there on the map. So it's, this is a really big long-term project for us. And we're going to take our time with it. It's not going to be over overnight. So we're really looking forward to seeing the end result as much as I'm sure as much as the fans are. So,
how has knowing going in you're going to make 3 of these impacted the features and what you're bringing out from game to game?
So it takes for starters, it takes some really long-term planning, and you know, when you start making a game, there's loads of stuff that you want to pack into that game, and you have to be realistic. You have to say that we have this much time and budget to make the game in. So what we can do is certain features that we'd like to do, we'll think, well, okay, we'll put those in the next game, and then we sort of queue up feature sets across 3 titles. And as I said, you know, it's a long-term planning a kind of problem that we have to solve. But it also means, you know, we just introduce more content in the form of new races, new playable races, which is where the real kind of draw of the game is playing those new races and you know, learning how different they are sort of culturally and mechanically in the game, and getting the joy of playing effectively a new game because they're such a different faction. We get to just keep doing that over time, and that design brief from the first game has gone down so well with fans, and they can just expect to see more of that over time.